Hello, everyone. This is Eric Pennington, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. We're glad that you've tuned in. A few things we wanted to tell you at the beginning of the show, and that's this podcast was created to be a tool to help you, primarily to discover and grow your EQ. Science and our own lived experiences confirm that the better we are at managing our emotions, the better we're going to be at making decisions, which leads to a better life. And that's something we all want. We're glad that you've taken out the time today to listen and hope that something that you hear will lead to a breakthrough. Hey, one last thing. We'd really appreciate a review on whichever platform you use to listen. And if you want to, leave some comments about what you heard today, as well as follow and subscribe. That way you won't miss a single episode as we continue this journey. And with that, the show begins. Welcome, everyone, to the Spirit of EQ podcast. I'm Eric Pennington, and with me is Jeff East. Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Hi, Eric, and all our listeners.
So the idea, Jeff, is excellence. We all want excellence.
Right.
But the hard reality is, how do we practice for excellence?
Right.
So today's show, we're going to talk a bit about that. And if I can just kind of prompt you a little bit, what I thought was interesting in what we were kind of discussing quasi before the recording, you know, let's say you're about 7/8 of the way there.
Okay.
That last eighth always seems to be the most difficult. Right. So if you're, I guess maybe a better example might be, right, if your goal was 100 and you're at 92, right?
Right.
That kind of thing. So can you talk a little bit about this as far as it relates to what we do, the practice for excellence?
Well, I first want to, I'll start off years ago. I got introduced to like league bowling, just fun, come bowl. And I ended up being
So Jeff, I'm gonna interrupt you.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that this was just like, hey, a couple of friends said, hey, why don't we go to the bowling alley type thing?
No, well, but then, getting into a league, where
Oh, okay. All right.
every week you bowl and to win and all that.
Yeah.
But there's fun leagues, and if you're talking softball, they call it a beer league, which is pretty much the same thing. And then you get into the series or scratch leagues where there's no handicap. Handicap leagues, we try to make it equal so that everybody gets a chance to win. It's in scratch bowling, just like it is in like scratch golf, you don't have a handicap, so you don't have any extra help. But I found out that I really enjoyed bowling. I was fairly natural at it, especially I'm sure everybody understands bowling, but you've got your strike ball, which every frame starts with the strike ball. Then if you don't get a strike, you have to try to get a spare. And that's what I discovered was that second ball, when you don't get a strike, is what I needed to work on. Because I was able to develop the skills to throw a fairly good first ball, good power, did well with that. But then, it doesn't sound like much, but a total score of 300 is the most you can get in a game.
Yes.
But anything over 200 is when you're getting into that scratch level. And if you miss one spare in a game, you've probably lost 10 points, 12 points because of the way bowling is, the scoring of bowling. If you get a strike on the first frame, you get whatever the next two balls are. So if you get a strike, you get 30 in the first. But a spare works, you get the 10 for the spare, and then you get the next ball. So if I, bowled 9 on my first ball in a frame and miss the spare, I've got 9. But if I pick that spare up and then I go bowl 9 in the next one, I have 18 now. If that's making any sense.
I think so.
Okay. So missing that pin cost me 9 pins. And, so 9 pins can turn a 190 into a 199. So I know I'm probably overcomplicating this, but so I discovered that. And I also just, by watching really good bowlers, by actually reading some books and things, I decided if I want to get better, this is what I have to work on. So that's what my goal was, to start working on picking up the spares, the cleaning up ball, the second ball of the
Hmm.
frame.
Hmm.
And that was difficult because everybody's first and when you're bowling, your first thought is I got to get a strike. Well, I've got that damn. But what can I do to get that little bit more to get me up in that over 200 range? So uh, I would go to the bowling alley for practice pretty much every week, at least once, and just try to get spares. I would have to imagine it because you would always start off with the full rack of pins. But I
Right.
would imagine, okay, I'm going to get the 10 pin, which is the back pin on the right, which for right handed bowlers is one of the hardest. So that's all I would aim at, even with the full rack of pins, and do that over and over again. The score, automatic scoring, is going to give me an 81 for the game, but that's not important. It's just working on that, or
So
imagining.
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off, Jeff, but I'm
Okay,
curious. Where did you learn to focus in on that particular pin in this process of practice?
because like said, for a right-handed bowler, that 10
Hmm.
pin is usually historically the hardest one to get because just the physics and the mechanics of it. Most bowlers, if they're working on their game, are going to throw a ball that hooks to the left if they're right-handed, or the opposite, obviously, if they're left-handed. So that 10 pin can become hard, and I've seen really good bowlers that could never pick it up. So
Mm.
I would practice that, and then imagine, okay, I left the 8 pin, which is another one that can be fairly common left.
Hmm.
So I would have to imagine, I know that I'm only aiming at it, although there's pins in front of it, if that makes any sense. But that's how you practice, and that's
Hmm.
all I would do is just work on that. Um, and like the place I went, they had a thing uh, where you paid so much money and you got 2 hours of bowling. You didn't pay by the game; you paid $10 or something. And so I would bowl the equivalent of maybe 20 or 30 games in that 2 hours, and worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and um, developed the muscle memory to be able to do it, and then develop techniques that no matter how the lanes are working, it didn't matter with the way I was picking spares up. So I worked on it and I worked on it and I worked on it until I was able to get good enough to bowl in these scratch leagues. But the thing is, this is the thing you got to remember. I couldn't stop doing that practice because I tried and I wasn't. It went away. So it was a.
Wow. So would I interpret that to mean that in order to keep the again, I'm going to use the from our previous episodes, I've used the analogies of muscles going to
Mhm,
atrophy if they're not used.
mhm.
Is it something to that effect of that if you don't use it, you lose it type thing?
Yeah, you don't you lose that. Just you lose the technique because it's a
Hmm.
specific technique, um, and you just lose it. And all of the good bowlers that I've known, and I've actually had a chance to talk to some professionals. That's how they did it. They
Mm.
got the easy part, which you would think would be the hard part, getting the strike, but then they worked on that next step, the hard thing, to become, a much better bowler than I was because they did it professionally. But uh,
Hmm.
that next step was the hard part. You started off by talking about that. In this case, I got up to about a 175 average, stayed
Hmm.
there. But
Hmm.
that last 25 pins, which would be 12.5%, if you're looking at it that way, that
Hmm.
was the difficult part. But that's what I needed to do to get to the point I wanted to be at with that.
So what were some of the emotions you felt in that difficult period, that 12.5%?
Well, frustration. Um,
Hmm.
it wasn't fun. Okay, it was fun to go in into that 2 hour period and just throw strike after strike after strike, but that didn't help me at all. So it wasn't fun. Um, it was very aggravating. Um, it was tiring. Because it wasn't like I did that and I went automatically, like from a 175 to a 205 average over a week.
Hmm.
It took
Hmm.
months. So it took patience. So you had to, deal with that. But for
Did
me and
you,
other people, go ahead.
did you, can you remember whether or not you ever had a point where you thought, I'm not going to do this. I'll just stick to what I've done before. I mean, quasi
Oh yeah,
giving up.
yeah. But then, I would go and bowl in my fun league, and then in the lanes next to us, there's a scratch league, and I'm watching these guys. And I go, okay, I still want to do that. Okay,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, there would be times, but I would see that, or I would watch. For me growing up, uh, maybe other people my age, ABC every Saturday had Chris Schinkel and Bo Burton with the professional bowlers tour.
Hmm.
Watching those guys. How do
Yeah.
you get to that good? And um, for me, it was worth it to be able to do it. But like I said, I things in my life started happening, and I just didn't have the time to do that. So I still bowled in a fun league, but my average went down to that 175, 180, which was good for that league. But I lost it because I wasn't doing it, because it's a
Gotcha.
constant. How many times have we used the term practice in here?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Um, I'm curious, Jeff, because I want to say I remember in a previous episode, did you not bowl a perfect game at one point in
Yeah,
time in your career?
I bowled one, and I've had some other ones that were close.
So how did you feel when you hit the perfect game?
It was really good. I felt good. It's impossible. Nobody ever bowls only perfect games. It just doesn't work when you're hitting a round object with a round object. Mother physics takes over, and sometimes things don't work like it's supposed to, or like you think it
Right.
should. It
Right.
felt really good, but I still think the work that I did to get to that scratch level s-
Hmm.
over the long term uh, was still more satisfying.
Do you believe that that same work also contributed to achieving that perfect game?
Well, with the perfect game, you never have to throw a strike, but all that work, well, any sport, it's consistency.
Hmm.
You have to, you know, your approach, your steps, how you're holding the ball for the way the lanes are that night. You have to be consistent, whether you're going for a strike or a spare. So yeah, all that practice on those spares help build that muscular neural pathway to be
Hmm.
able to
Hmm.
do it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's all a part of it. But if I wouldn't have done that hard work, one, I probably would have not bowled to 300 because that was in a scratch league. I wouldn't have been around high caliber bowlers.
Mm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have developed that consistency to be able to do it.
And we'll be back to the episode after this. Jeff, what is the SEQ development report?
I'm glad you asked me that, Eric. The SEQ development report is something that we here at Spirit of EQ have developed to blend the idea of emotional intelligence with a person's spiritual life. And we're not talking about religion, we're talking about how they connect with themselves, other people, and the world around them.
Why is it important?
I think it's important because it allows someone to see where they stand, to give them information about maybe parts of their life they may need to work on, parts of their life that they're really doing well, and learn to leverage it. And it just gives a person a better way of getting through the world.
So how do you get this report?
Well, first, you need to contact us.
Mm-hmm.
Info at Spirit of EQ is just a great way to do it. Then you would take an assessment, 15, 20 minutes, done online. And then after that, the report requires a debrief to go through all the things in it because it's got a ton of information. And then if you want to further your journey, we can do coaching and things like that with you down the road. And that's basically it.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. And now back to the episode. Well, and I think that also speaks to even outside of sports. You know, you'll hear, I mean, companies out there these days are spending probably billions with a B on leadership development type of training and stuff. And I think one of them, and it's very simplistic in nature, what you just described, consistency. You didn't say making sure that you bowl one perfect game every other week. No. You didn't say you've got to have a certain bowling ball that was made in Taiwan versus France. You didn't say you have to be in a bowling alley that was built by John R. Smith and has the certain type of wood on the. You talked about consistency. And
I want to, one other thing that I forgot to mention.
Yeah.
I had somebody that was a very knowledgeable bowler. He ran a pro shop and, participated in the professional leagues. Got to be friends with him, and he watched me bowl several games and he analyzed my swing. So I would understand what went into the swing because everybody does it differently. And he told me you're something called an inside out bowler. So this is how you need to go about it. So I had professional help say, do this. This is what, you need to know. This is how you do it. This is
almost
your
a
way.
Bowling mentor, if you will.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
all right.
We're not going to talk about bowling the whole time.
Yeah, I was going to say, because there is
music. No.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I was going to say, I'm sure it's going to come in somewhere. But I want to pivot because you've used bowling as this broader analogy. I mean, you could substitute bowling for leadership and leadership for, being a good husband or wife or spouse, partner, whatever it may be. Right. So let's look at some of the competencies and how they may help. Right. So the first one I want you to kind of talk about is recognize patterns.
And in this case, I'm not talking about the patterns of your actual bowling swing or what you're doing, but recognizing the pattern of learning the practice of this is the pattern I need to do. When I go in this case, we'll talk about the bowling in just a second. When I go into the bowling alley to practice, my pattern is going to be this. This is what I'm going to do. And if all of a sudden I get bored at shooting with those single pins and start doing the fun getting a strike, okay, I'm out of my pattern now. I've recognized that I am not doing what I'm doing. So if you're talking about being a good husband, and part of your pattern is, spending, whatever time listening to your wife about her day or something, and that's part of the pattern you need to do to help your relationship. If you get out of that pattern and don't listen, fade out or just don't allow the time, you recognize that I am not in the pattern that I need to be to fulfill whatever I'm trying to get really good at.
Yeah, and I think that kind of supports the idea that, by determining what it is you truly want from that particular relationship or situation or job, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that way, but I had a definite goal. I had, this is what my goal is. In this case, it was
there was something about it that was important to you. I mean,
Hmm.
it it wasn't something that was abstract in nature.
Hmm.
So this one might be an obvious to our audience, but intrinsic motivation.
And once again, you need to be motivated intrinsically with the way we're talking. You have to have that goal set. You have to decide, this is what I want. That this is motivating me to put the time, effort, work, um, investment, however you want to say it. You have to be motivated from within. I could have somebody off to the side cheering me on, but if I didn't want to do the work because I want that goal of my relationship or whatever it is,
Mhm.
you're never going to reach it. So you need to be intrinsically motivated to be
Yeah,
able to follow that. And and
yeah,
and I think that's one of the things that corporations, organizations do, is they try to extrinsically motivate people instead of getting that person to buy into the whole goal of the organization. They, almost the carrot and stick kind of a thing where.
yeah. Because that's a great point, Jeff. Because I have had situations. I'm thinking of the most recent where um, I I take the approach of typically it's like, well, here's the story, here's the why behind the story, here's what we're
Mhm,
trying to accomplish, because I want that other person to understand what are we dealing with, what are we doing, and then I want to allow them to use their creativity to figure out either how to solve the problem or
mhm,
improve something or whatever. And what's interesting to me is that there are a number of people who don't do well with that. And I
mhm,
think one of the reasons why they don't do well with that is because they maybe have come out of an environment where it was that old command control thing. You
mhm.
know, I'm in charge. You do what I say. Here are the instructions. I'll see you on Friday.
Right.
And on the face of it, you could say, well, if that's what it takes to get the job done, maybe so. But when you check the box of we got the job done, what about that person who was involved in the process? What happened to them?
What happened to them? What is their emotion when that happens? Is it, man, we worked together and we got this, and you're happy, or, well, hell, I got it done. You know, what
Or
is the
Jeff, maybe even sadder is I don't really matter. I mean,
right
they told me what to do. I'm just a number,
on the
right?
spreadsheet?
Yeah, yeah. Let's look at optimism. What role does that play?
Well, once again, um, that's what keeps you going, you know, when you start a process. So, you talked about, like, okay, we're going to get from 92 to 100. So
Hmm.
you're at 94
Hmm.
and you're not really moving that much right now.
Yeah.
Don't get discouraged by the next six. Look back at the two you've gained. I've already
Hmm.
made some progress in this. In my case, okay, I picked up 6 pins on my bowling average. Okay, good. I'm moving ahead. And, I talked about it every time we talk about optimism. Be realistic with it. But I'm moving ahead with this project. I'm putting work in and I'm seeing a result. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm seeing something happening. Something is changing, something, whatever the thing is you're talking about, something is changing and you're moving ahead. So, pay
Yeah.
attention to that.
Well,
You know,
yeah, and I think it speaks to the ideas, Jeff, about it's those kind of positive stories that help reinforce in our brains to keep going
and
because
let's say you're talking about, okay, I didn't rock the boat in a meeting like I normally would. You know, that's what you're working on. I want to be more even keeled when I'm dealing with the people I'm working with or in my relationship. And if you have the opportunity to do what you used to do, rock the boat or whatever, and you didn't, hang on to that. That's a win. You had a win. Okay, you had one win. All right. That's going to make it easier to get the second win and the third win, and with
Yeah.
whatever is work, whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. How about empathy?
Well, I should have put self-empathy.
Oh, okay. Well,
I
talk
should have
about
said
self-empathy.
self-empathy. I should have wrote that down. But just give yourself a break. You're learning something new. You're learning a new skill, and very few people are born with that skill at the excellent level, whatever the skill is. They're probably the savants and things like that, but you are working towards it. So give yourself a break where maybe you have a 2-week period where you've not moved that number or whatever it is the way you want. Give yourself a break. You're still learning. So give yourself that opportunity to grow. Don't let it turn into self-pity or negative thoughts. But yeah, I'm human. I am still working on it. That's the main thing I'm doing right now. And if I don't have results this week, I got next week.
The key is are you moving forward, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last one. How about the noble goal?
It probably doesn't have too much to do with bowling, but if you develop your noble goal, you're more than likely being intrinsically motivated to make this change to be able to fulfill your noble goal better. If you've recognized your noble goal, you now know what is the important thing for me to be a change maker. Whether it's a one-on-one conversation, however that fits into your life. So focusing on your noble goal, I think, will help you keep that motivation going, will help you give yourself empathy, will help you be optimistic, that kind of thing. So we talk about how the noble goal is the driver for all these other competencies, and I think in this case it is very important that what you're doing is because you're doing it because you want to improve who you are to be able to better fulfill your noble goal.
Yeah. And I think that there's something to be said when we have something that we're focusing on that is above the fray of everyday life, right? Because inevitably anything that we pursue or endeavor to do is going to be met with all kinds of problems and opportunities. And in this case, the problems, right? The ups and downs of life, the unexpected, the thing that you thought would work and didn't work, and all of those different things. I have found that people that have a noble goal, they experience the same problems and opportunities as the person that doesn't have a noble goal, but they have this, it's an interesting dynamic. They tend to weather difficulty a lot better. And I think it is because there's something that they're aiming for that is bigger than themselves.
Yeah. If you have this thing that's deep inside you, it's going to be hard to derail that.
Yeah.
Even with, like you said, all the trials and tribulations that we go through, you're going to be able to come back to that. And that's going to get you back where you need to be. You're not going to just let that go away. If you really recognize your total goal or your noble goal, and you're trying to live it, that becomes who you are.
Yeah. That's a good place to end the show. It's great to be with all of you today, and
yes,
we look forward to the next time that we're together. Take care.
Hi, everyone. This is Eric again. A couple of things as we've ended the show. We hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully, you're tuning in on a regular basis. We'd love it if you would give us a great review on whatever platform you're listening to the podcast. It's so appreciative and helps us as we try to get more exposure for the work we do and the episodes that we publish. And we're grateful to you as a listener. The second thing is, just remember, our content is for educational purposes only. It's not intended by any stretch to diagnose or to treat anything that may be occurring in your life or anyone else's life that you may be connected to through the podcast. But once again, we appreciate you tuning in to the shows. And as always, we look forward to the next time that we're together. Take care.